We are back, you guys. It's been a long time. You can obviously tell it is fall now. It's been like a solid, gosh, it's gotta have been a month and a half since I worked on these things at all. I just blew all these leaves out of here. They were covering the entire container. Obviously we haven't gotten anywhere because we've been back-to-back shows for work, and now we're finally in here. So I am laying down some of this insulation just to kind of get a rough idea of measuring. We already had bought the insulation and the subfloor, so that's kind of our next step. Obviously, I was planning on putting these columns in and then cutting this wall out, but I can't even lift the stupid panels by myself to move them over to cut the strips to put in the ceiling. And I think my dad might be coming up for deer season, and he's a pretty good welder, I think. So he might be helping me out a little bit, or my husband might help me out. I haven't quite figured it out yet because we're just trying to get back in the swing of stuff. But you can see where I've cut some of this bare metal is now rusting a little bit, just because we've had tons and tons of rain. So I did buy a zinc heavy primer that I'm gonna spray all of that raw metal before we close this thing in. And then I'm also gonna spray it on the outside of the container before we paint. But we are just kind of getting back into it. Today, my goal is to at least get the insulation like positioned in here and measured out. Obviously, I'm not gonna be doing like vapor barrier or subfloor yet because you can still see daylight, and there's really no point in that if it's just gonna get rained on in here. However, it has been just getting rained on outside anyway for like a month and a half, so it really doesn't matter, I guess, but I just don't want that mess in here. So that's where we're at right now. We're gonna kind of get going on this. I am hoping that maybe this weekend, now that we're done with shows and stuff, my husband will maybe be willing to help me cut this final wall out and get these brackets in, or these posts, columns, pillars in, and at least get those strips cut. I would like to get the strips cut and at least the ones on the top laid up there, so that way less water will get in. The plan is that we are taking these scrap pieces and we're cutting these ridges down like that. So that way each ridge is gonna be lined up along the tops and the sides so that we seal the whole thing in. Honestly, you guys, that one's super slick. Check that out. Obviously, I'm gonna have to spray foam in the ridges there. But that's no big deal because I'm gonna spray the walls, I think, anyway. But for the floors, it was super convenient because this little notch right there happened to be exactly the measurement I needed. So I didn't even have to mark everyone. It just zipped right through. So check it out. I just have to put that last piece up there because it's not a full piece. And we're all the way to the end. So I'm super excited. That was like way easier than I expected it to be. Nice thing is these are all the same size containers. So once we get that wall out, I'll be able to just go boop, boop, and do those. Do you guys remember when I got these containers and I said this second one was the prettiest because it looked the cleanest and it had like all this paint in it, and I was wondering why, thinking, oh man, they probably like used it for painting or something, but it looked so clean. No, it was rusty, that's why. It's this cold galvanizing compound. This is a zinc rich coating. This is like a primer basically that stops surface rust. So that's what I'm doing to this area, and as I was spraying it, I was like, well, obviously that's what they did where all the rust was, which is why it looks so clean and pretty, because they covered all the rust spots with paint. But they used the right stuff, obviously, at least because it's the same color. It's that zinc rich stuff. So that's what we're going through right now. Anywhere it's been like dinged and damaged and you can see like surface rust, especially because it was just raining here for like several weeks in a row, anything that has surface rust is gonna show up now. So it's actually kind of convenient for me because now I can go through, spray all those spots before we close this in, and then hopefully avoid any further rusting. Okay guys, we are back in the container. I am just using that primer day 2. If you haven't seen these little spray handles, this is fantastic if you're using spray bottles. You could also roll this on or buy a gallon and just spray the entire thing with a sprayer. That is what I'm gonna be doing on the exterior, but the inside, obviously, this container is worse than the other ones, so it's pretty much all getting coated, which kind of sucks. But the other ones weren't so bad, so I just like spot did those areas. We're just onto the harder beat one. But when I do this on the outside of the container, I will spray the entire thing with a rust blocking primer before spraying it to paint it. But for now, for the inside, this is what we're using, the cold galvanizing compound with the spray handle. So you can see literally you just pull the trigger and spray it. It's super convenient, especially yesterday I did about 5 cans of this, and they're like $8.50, $9 a piece, so they get a little expensive. Obviously I wouldn't do the entire outside with it or anything, but it wears on your hand, so that's why I got the little trigger grip. So you can see this part is really, really rusty just because it was a, welded on patch. Oh man, these fumes are rough though, guys, especially in a container. I have the doors open, but I'm in a corner. And this stuff is particularly strong, but we're just gonna go over and coat the entire thing. Make sure we get all of those rust spots so that it doesn't eat away at our container from the inside out. Obviously, I am in a very cold climate, so I wanna make sure that this is not going to rust. With the weather, it gets hot and humid in the summer and really cold in the winter. Okay, so if you guys have never seen the top of shipping containers, this is what they look like. They have these grooves like this, so if you're trying to plan and you haven't seen the top of a container, this is what they are. They're flexy. They kind of have a curve to them so that the water drains off both sides, which obviously in this case is, I mean, that's what they're made for, but in this case, we've got this gap here, and that is one of the drainage points on both sides, and that is actually where we're connecting them together, and we don't want water to go into our container. So, and you can see like some of them have big pools in them because they just have divots on them, but that doesn't really matter for our sake because we're going to put a second floor on this anyway. But what we're going to do here is this is where we're going to weld in. You can see, obviously we have this flat space between these ridges that we can work with. So we're gonna weld and seal along that ridge there, or along that seam there, and then waterproof all that, and then hopefully get all our drainage to go off the front and back instead of caving into this middle. All right guys, it's Monday, we are back. I tried to get this all figured out over the weekend, but I had my kids with me both times that I went to Menards, and it just never works out. So I forgot several different materials and blah, blah, blah. But we're getting there. So today I ran to Menards this morning right after I dropped off at school. We're like 45 minutes from the closest hardware store that has anything. So that was a kind of a bummer to have to run again, but we figured it out. So what we're doing today is this channel here on top of both containers that needs to be sealed. We are going to be waterproofing it. And again, short of custom ordering things like meant for shipping containers, this is like our hardware store DIY. So these are roof edge, they're C-channels. And they actually fit exactly in this groove here without falling down in there. And they're very flexible for the little bit of height difference that I have. So I think my plan is going to be adhesive on both sides, setting it down into this channel. It sits very tight, which is super nice. And then come through and waterproof the seams on both sides. Obviously, that's going to be a temporary hold until I can get these welded together. Like I had said, my dad is coming up for deer season and he's a pretty decent welder. And so I think the silicone, and it'll be, you can see how these flex. Obviously, now that we've taken the walls all out, we have supports in there, but the roof normally flexes anyway. So I think until we can get these welded together to make them a little more structural, that's going to be our best way to waterproof at this time anyway. So that's what I'm going to do today, work on getting these waterproofed, and then go inside and start working on the floor so we can get some walls up and some heat going. Okay, so we are pretty much done. It went really quick. Obviously, all I have right now is the adhesive. It just sat in the channel. And then I'm going to go through with the waterproof caulking and then do both seams on both sides. You can see where they overlap. We've definitely adhesived them very well. But when you get down to the ends here, you can see, obviously, it goes to this corner casting and then not over there. You can still see inside by like ½ an inch. But the plan there is on the inside, I bought gutters, actually, and I'm going to attach them vertical this way. So as the water's pouring off here, there's a gutter system right here anyway that's keeping it from getting inside the building. So I'll show you that when we get down to the bottom. I'm just finishing this side here, and then we're going to let this dry a little bit and then go through with that silicone. Okay, progress. We got that steel column in. You can obviously tell I had to block it up with a 4x4. I thought when I had measured the first time that these were the correct height. I don't know if it's because I was going off of after the subfloor was put in, but obviously I'm going to frame it steel to steel. So it worked fine. I put a 4x4 in there. I know that's not the correct way to do it. If you're going to do this, special order the taller ones. This is the tallest one they had available in store. It goes to, what does it say? 8 foot 3 inches? Yeah, 8 foot to 8 foot 4. So realistically, it was only a ½ inch. Well, I have a ½ inch of adjustment that I can do with this 4x4 to push up, but it fits just fine. So that's one done. We're gonna get the other 3 done today. I had to notch out, obviously on those ridges, to make sure it's flush with the beam. Guys, I'm so excited. I knew that originally I wanted this wall out, and then my husband tried to convince me to leave it in. And then as I was figuring out like waterproofing and things like that, it just wasn't gonna work. They had to come out because when all the leaves were falling down in between them, I realized there's gonna be this gap in between the 2 walls that's gonna be impossible to seal. So humidity and bugs and all the things could come up from that bottom side, and it would be really difficult to seal this top part also. And so it just kind of had to go. I could have worked around it and kept the wall, but it would have been way more difficult. And honestly, I would rather just have it open like this anyway. So here's our space right now. I am, again, once I put the ceiling and floors and stuff in, I'm gonna wrap these columns in like a cool, either faux brick or wood or something awesome, obviously. I would have loved to not have columns at all, but I also didn't want to have to put in like super expensive steel headers. So for this 40-foot span, obviously, we'll just go with the columns. But here it is. We're gonna finish priming all of our metal on this one container, and then I obviously have my foam cut, my insulation from last week. So we're gonna get this all sweeped out and cleaned out, and then lay that foam as the up area is drying, because we had put the adhesive and a little gutter system in up there. And then once that's dry and these floors are in, then we're gonna go back through and caulk all that. This is what that gutter system looks like. So here is the gutter. It's just one of those plastic, it's a U-snap gutter. So it's just literally the plastic U shape. And it's the 4-inch size because it fits exactly between these 2 metal pieces. And it sits super tight in there. So between that sitting tight and then siliconing in there, I think it's gonna work just fine for what I need. So you can see this is when it doesn't have it in. It's this gap right here. And instead of welding to try to get this all tight and waterproof, which would be a pain in the butt, especially on this door end, that was my solution there, was to set that gutter in here. And it's kind of got these ridges in here, so the gutter kind of sets in there and like snaps in almost, and it sits tight in there. So then I'm gonna silicone that. And you can see where I did the top here. Obviously none of that is waterproofed yet, but you can see that piece, that was like our gutter system that sat down in there. It's gonna push water out past this piece. Plus, so You can see here, obviously there's like a few little spots of daylight, but otherwise it sits pretty dang tight most of the direction. And so that's all gonna get siliconed, and then on top of it, everything under here is gonna get spray foam insulated anyway. So I think between the gutter system, the silicone, and then the spray foam, I don't think any water or air is gonna get in here, even though it doesn't look like it right now. But that's what we have, is that gutter tight in there, and then that kind of seals off everything vertical wise. So I'm gonna put that on these two spots also, and then seal those in. Obviously, I did not flip this camera around all day while I was working. I finished priming with the spray. So I just have zinc all over my face. Anyway, I'm gonna go home and take a shower, and that is all until we get to the big stuff.